But during the time when she was growing up, the German men were interned into camps in South Africa. And a lot of boys or a lot of children didn't have opportunity to go home, which is what happened with my stepfather. He was in school with my mother's brother and in boarding school in Swakopmund in the German school, and there was nobody to go home to because his mother had passed away, and he would go home with his friend, my mother's brother, and that's actually how they met, is that he went for holidays, he went with his friend and to basically my grandmother's house or grandparents' house, and spent quite a few holidays with them. And then she was, as I say, a young girl who enjoyed life. She also, like her mother, enjoyed life to the fullest. My stepfather was very musical. So he played the accordion. He had somebody who played the drums and somebody who played the guitar, and they made music. So he made his income by playing on festivals. So he was booked out throughout the year, playing for a party here and a fest there and somewhere else. And that's basically how he made his income. And the story always goes that my mother used to start dancing on a Friday evening and fall into bed on a Sunday afternoon, ready for work on a Monday morning. So
it's such a lovely story. I can hear the music, those boereorkes instruments.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So that is so he didn't become available to my mother because she was that much younger. And anyway, she went there to dance and with her friends and so on. But obviously, knowing him gave her some advantages in the sense of choosing the music she wanted to dance to, etc., etc. So yeah, so that is how he made his living, other than being on the farm that was his father's farm. So the story there is also very interesting. His father came out as a soldier from Germany and then managed to appropriate or buy a farm in Namibia. Now, if you know Namibia, it's very, very barren. And the farm he bought had two yielding crops. The one was chalk. Literally, they used chalk to build houses with, or to make the plaster with, and things like that. So
it's like a powder.
Yes, like a white powder. And then the other one was they started farming with Karakou sheep, because the Karakou were very were quite adaptable to that country and could survive the barrenness, because they could feed off the tiny grasses and the little bit of greenery off the shrubs. So that was how they basically made their money.
And the wool was very, very sought after internationally, even then.
It wasn't the wool. They actually used the skin of the newborn lambs, and they made Karakou coats. Which you wouldn't do anymore, because it is obviously no longer attractive with with the cruelty and things like that.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was very sought after material.
Yeah. For coats and stuff like that in winter in Europe.
Yes, it was exported and made good revenue.
So in a sense, they came with a certain skill Afrikaans we call it ambag, but they know how to woodwork. They knew all sorts of farming skills, and they came to a barren land and land of opportunity, and they created opportunities for themselves. So it was, in a sense, very entrepreneurial, but they came with trauma, and they came with a lot of pain as well.
Well, if we look at the history, Germany at that time was going through, not just Germany, Europe as a whole, the people were hungry. There was no food. And so a barren land meant I can at least have land where I can grow food, no matter what the cost. So as long as you got land close to a river, you could plow and you could grow crops. But then came, and it was during the Second World War that the German men from Namibia were interned in South Africa. And this meant that the farm was not managed. My stepfather at that time was still at school, and so there was nobody on the farm. So before the men were released, my father went back to the farm, and the farm then was occupied by the Herreros, who were the original inhabitants of that land. And my father then renegotiated the land to be in his father's name, because it could prove that the land had been obviously signed over through the deed. There was a deed in place, and so on. So my stepfather single-handedly renegotiated his father's position, which meant he couldn't go back to school. He needed now to stay on the land, because that was the only way he could save this farm from going back to the Herreros at that time.
So became a farmer at a very early age.
He became a farmer at a very, very early age. And if it wasn't for him, his father would have lost the farm, which is obviously a double tragedy when we look at what happened when the father said, "You cannot have the farm. I don't know who I'm going to leave the farm with." So there is this double whammy, basically. I have saved you your farm, and yet I'm not even good enough to be considered that this is my land, that this is my farm. So that is very, very sad in the father-son relationship of the time. And being a young man, it was very, very difficult then for him when his father did come back, because then there was obviously this ego between father and son. This farm is, I have earned my keep on this farm. And his father sent him away for a year to study in Stellenbosch. He went and studied at a winery in Stellenbosch and did an apprenticeship in Stellenbosch. And I think it was just to get him out of the father's hair for some time, in which time the father remarried and had 7 children with the second wife. So my father is the middle of 3 children. So he has an older sister, it was him, and then a younger sister. And then during the time when he wasn't there, his father remarried and had 7 children with the second wife.
Yeah, those were the stories of that time, even in my family system.
Stories of the time, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I don't know too much about the history of his mother and his father. That is basically all I know is of that time, where he comes from.
You mean your stepfather?
My stepfather, yes.
Yeah, yeah.